Almost anyone who knows the place would recognize Bridgewater, Nova Scotia in this old postcard from the 1890s. The town has changed over the years, but not its form, and certainly the LaHave River hasn't altered much. In some ways, there was a lot more in Bridgewater then than there is now, because of the many mills that operated up and down the brooks that fed into the river, like the mills of Sebastopol, tanneries, foundries, blacksmiths, cordage and spinning mills, and the Weil carding mill, one of the busiest in the Sebastopol area on the thriving outskirts of Bridgewater. Sebastopol. It's an odd name with a fascinating history, according to Verta Reeves, who guides visitors through the Weil carding mill.
Well, because of the War of Sebastopol.
The Crimean War.
The Crimean War.
Yeah.
All the people around this section were fighting always about the water rights and things like that.
So because they had arguments and lawsuits and so forth, they named this place after the battle.
After the Battle of Sebastopol.
Continual battle on the outskirts of Bridgewater.
That's true.
Oh, that's a fascinating story. This was not the only mill on the river, the only industry down the stream.
There was the tannery. I have to stop and think again. The Bridgewater Foundry, a chair factory, a grist mill, and a number of smaller mills along the brook to the LaHave River.
So it was a pretty busy place.
It was a busy place.
Well, now let's start talking about the business of the Weil carding mill.
Yes.
I have a little bit of wool here in my hand, and it has, stuff in it. And I gather this is the machine that took that out.
This is the picking machine. And you had to pick your wool before it was carded or batted. By that I mean you had to take out all the knots and all the bits of dirt.
What was the purpose of the carding mill? What was it designed to do?
Well, the carding mill is to straighten your wool fibers in preparation for spinning.
They're curly to begin with.
Oh yes, they're curly and very dirty and very knotty.
But this wool isn't dirty.
No, but it's been washed. They washed it before they brought it to the mill.
I see.
And if you were going to spin it, the girls mixed lard oil with their wool to replace the lanolin that had been removed.
It would be a very slow hand process to try to straighten all these fibers out.
Hours and hours, yes.
And yet I guess at one time it was done that way.
Oh yes, a hard job too.
All right, it went through the picking machine.
Yes.
And into the
picking room.
The picking room.
And that has two sets of picks, one on the outside and one on the inside. And if you were standing here, it would look like a snowstorm. The wool is flying around.
That's why there was a separate room for
That's right. And I understand that the children years ago used to just love to get in there when they were picking because they'd be covered with it, and it looked like snow.
Dear, I don't imagine it was too good for their lungs.
No,
either,
I don't think so.
We didn't think about those things in those days, I guess. Now, from here, where did it go?
It went either into the batting machine or the carding machine.
Oh, you'll have to explain the difference between
Well,
those.
now, the batting machine makes your bats of wool that you put between material for a quilt or a wool puff or a bedding. And the carding machine made the rolags that you took home to spin.
So the batted wool was not spun?
No, just the carding wool.
I see.
The carded wool.
And how did the carding machine work?
It works exactly like hand cards. Now, with hand cards, it would take you a whole day to card a pound of wool, but the machine does 12 pounds in an hour. And it goes through a process of the liquor in to the carding cylinder, and they go to the right, and the strippers and the workers go to the left. But now the teeth are set at different angles in them, like hand cards, so it's straightening out all your fibers. And at the end, it comes to a big roller that's called the doffer. And, no, I beg your pardon, the fancy, and that fluffs your wool. And then the doffer removes your wool from the carding cylinder into rolags 24 by a ½ inch in diameter.
I'm going to have to take you back through a little bit of that again because you've done some things there which I don't quite understand. The machine is designed to straighten the wool fibers.
Right.
And yet you talked about one of the wheels at the end, the fancy, which was supposed to fluff the wool. Didn't that curl it all up again?
No.
Oh.
It has very long teeth, and that fluffs it and sort of stands your fiber up. And then the doffer takes it off of your machine in the long roll.
You say the machine will handle 12 pounds of wool an hour.
12 pounds
It doesn't
an hour.
sound like very much, but wool is very light stuff.
Very, very, very light.
So that would actually be quite a quantity of wool.
That's right.
What would the average person, you know, bringing his wool to the mill, how much would he bring at a time?
I think about 10 pounds. I'm not too sure about that.
Oh, so he would have something under an hour's worth of work for the mill.
Oh, yes, that's right. But there were thousands of pounds brought in the run of a season. I think one year they did 25,000 pounds.
The family portrait was almost a cliche of Victorian times. And thank goodness, because it gives us such a clear picture today of the people who made those times what they were. Like Dean Weil and his family, he built the mill and operated it, and finally handed over to his son, Arcanus Weil. You'll hear him referred to as the second Mr. Weil later in the program. By today's standards, he was a hard man who believed in extracting a long, hard day's work for a small day's pay. Even by the standards of his time, he demanded a lot for a little. Bradford Reeves, he's 93, still lives just behind the Weil Mill. You worked at the foundry across the road.
I worked, yes. My father had that for a couple of years. Then I went to the railroad.
Now, the Weil carding mill, which is right behind us here, was there much traffic to the Weil mill in those days?
That road was so full of ox teams that you couldn't hardly make your way up and down. They came up here even from Beach Meadows. Do you know where that is?
No.
Well, that's way down towards Liverpool on the shore there. They used to leave home early in the night, get here early in the morning, stay all day, and go back home the next night with a load of wool.
Was this the only carding mill then in the area?
The only one that I know of at that time, yeah.
And all of the farmers from miles around brought their wool here then?
Yes, from everywhere around there. Yes, with a good many miles around. And then later, there was a small one started in Mahone Bay, but not like this one.
This is a fairly large mill for its type then, isn't it?
Yes, they carded a lot of wool here.
I guess the Wiles must have done fairly well out of the thing.
They did. If you knew the business, it's kind of a gold mine.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Why is that?
Well, there's a lot of the wool goes under the machine. And that gets all cleaned and carted over, and
that's just gravy for the folks that run the place.
For the money, yeah.
Oh well, we won't get too deeply into that. I don't want to cast aspersions on the Weil name.
Well, they had to make money in order to keep going.
What did it cost to run the wool through?
5 cents a pound to pick it and card it. But then you get shoddy from your machines. Now that's the short fiber that falls on the floor beneath the machines. And the man who owns the mill owns the shoddy and sells that for a profit. Now, the mill was operated by 4 ladies, and they would shake the dirt out of the shoddy and put it through the machines and charge 15 cents a pound for it. That's if you didn't have wool and you wanted to make a quilt.
Yes.
You came and bought the shoddy.
You came and bought the shoddy.
That's right.
It was perfectly good wool.
Oh, yes.
In spite of the name, because shoddy...
Right. Short fibers and bits of dirt in it.
The word shoddy these days is almost a pejorative term.
Right. Now, when they got through with the wool, they usually brought the wool to the mill in a bag, a burlap bag. Now, the bag was opened and hung on the wall. But then when they got through, they weighed their wool, put it back in the same bag, and pinned the bag shut with a thorn from a hawthorn tree that they paid the children 5 cents a quart to pick.
Oh, good. 5 cents a quart.
5 cents a quart. And they're terribly, terribly hard to pick.
Let's talk about comparative values, because you've used terms here like 5 cents a pound and an average load of 10 pounds, so a man would pay 50 cents to get his wool carded and picked.
Right.
And 5 cents a quart for these things, but those terms don't mean too much. I mean, 50 cents isn't very much these days.
No.
But how much did it represent in those days when there wasn't that much cash around?
I think one year they made $80 profit in their shoddy. At 20 cents a pound, that's a lot of shoddy.
And that was a lot of money.
That's a lot of money.
What was the average wage in those days? The women
$2 a week.
$2 a week?
$2 a week for 6, 8, 10, 12, 15 hours a day.
But what was it like to work in the Weil carding mill in the 1890s? Mrs. Sevilla Weigel is 95 today, but 80 years ago, just a slip of a girl, she operated here. How many hours a day did you put in here?
From sometimes till 9 o'clock in the night, from 6 in the morning to 9 at night.
6 in the morning till 9 at night?
Yeah.
And how many days a week?
From Monday morning to Saturday night.
And I guess when there was a fair amount of wool to do, you'd be working most nights.
No, we never work nights, no late. Lots of nights, 9. Not every night 9, but lots of nights 9 o'clock.
Well, 9 o'clock is nights as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
That's getting on there. So it was up to 15 hours a day
Yeah.
that you did here.
And we never got a cent extra pay. $2 a week is all we got.
You worked here for $2 a week. Early in the season, you worked here 3 springs. Early in the season, it must have been pretty cold.
Well, we used to find the coal. Didn't have much wood to make fire. Pick up old wood and burn dirt out the machine when to clean them out.
What do you mean there wasn't much wood for the fire? Because we're surrounded by wood here.
Mr. Weil, he run it, old Dean Weil and Canis. And they wouldn't bring us wood.
They were a bit stingy about the wood?
Yeah.
For the stove? So it must have got pretty cold here.
They eat lots of days cold in the spring, because when July come,
Well, you didn't have to worry about that. Then it was getting too hot.
Yeah.
But early in the season, when the sun went down fairly early in the day,
Cold, yeah.
it was cold, and I guess it would be pretty dark. But you had lamps.
Lamps, but never used them.
You never used them. They were just here for decoration, is that it?
I never seen no lamps.
We'll talk to Mrs. Weigel again later. First, these messages. Waterman's Tannery and the Carriage Factory and the many other mills up and down Sebastopol's brook have long since gone. In fact, the last mill operating on the brook was the carding mill. You see it here as it stood in its heyday, with Arcanus and 2 friends standing by the door. But eventually it fell on hard times too, although the building survived. Altered, though, a long and ugly dormer added through the roof to provide apartment quarters upstairs. This was how it looked when it was taken over by the Nova Scotia Museum in the early 70s. Fortunately, the machinery was still there too, standing idle in the basement, covered with the cobwebs of 50 years' neglect. Inside and out, the old Weil mill was a mess, but enough was left of the original that it could be recovered and restored. Today, it stands much as it did when the Wiles kept it running up to 15 hours a day.
But I'm glad that they've saved the mill. It's really wonderful. So many people are really interested in it.
One question that I've had asked while we've been here this afternoon is why doesn't it operate? Why doesn't it go? Because it seems like a mill like this should be operating.
Well, they need some new belts and they need some new card cloth.
But it's planned to get the thing to
I think
operate.
eventually they will have it operating, perhaps just to demonstrate.
Do you think they'll be able to get the wool to run through it?
Oh, I have a list a mile long of people who would like to have their wool rebatted.
Is that right?
Oh, yes.
Rebatted. That means they're
Rebatted.
taking it out of old quilts.
Old of old quilts and washing the wool and then bringing it back to be rebatted.
That would
Because
fluff
it gets
up,
knotted.
so
Yes, it gets knotted, you see. Yes. The checkerboard, I don't think you've noticed that, but that belonged to the second Mr. Weil. Now, he was a professional checker player, and it's homemade.
A professional checker player.
It's numbered. He played by number while he was working.
So he would work along, and somebody would make a move, and then he would simply
That's right.
give a number
That's right.
for his moves.
That's right.
I've heard of chess players doing that. I didn't realize it was
No,
done
but
with
he did
checkers.
it. Well, Mr. Weil, the first Mr. Weil sold tea to his customers. He imported tea black tea, which he sold for 20 cents a pound. And if you couldn't pay, well, he took cranberries or butter, or it was a real barter system. But it was very, very cold. The girls found it very, very cold in the mill.
Did he operate the mill on a barter system as well, or was it strictly
no,
cash?
It was strictly cash, but if you couldn't pay, he would take something in exchange.
Now, the mill is run by water power.
That's right.
So how does that work?
Well, we have an overshot water wheel. I lift the gate, and the water comes through on the top of the sluice, across the top of the water wheel, and the weight of the water is that's what gives you your power.
Is that the original wheel?
No, that's the third wheel. They rebuilt it in 1974. The old one was here, but it had collapsed. And it's a 7-horsepower wheel.
Well, I won't ask you how they figured out that it was 7 horsepower.
I could tell you, but I haven't it right at hand.
I see.
The only thing that's not original in the mill is the little stove. It's an old stove, but it's not the original stove. I think the original stove was a double diamond, like they had in the old screw houses. And I think that was made down here in the Bridgewater Foundry.
So there was a stove in here?
Oh, yes.
But did it provide enough heat to keep people
No, not
warm?
really. The women didn't work in the wintertime, I don't think. Their busiest time was from May on. And in the wintertime, the water would freeze, you see, and they couldn't run the wheel.
I guess I'm getting confused, because I had the impression that sheep were sheared, you know, fairly late in the season.
No, in May.
In May is shearing
in
time,
May,
is it?
Yes.
Oh, well, now I've learned something today. You shear the sheep in May.
Shear the sheep in May and wash them at home.
So the mill didn't actually run year-round?
No, only if they had bats to do. If they were going to rebat some wool, well, then they would run. If they had the water, of course.
Was there a different price for batting than for carding?
No, same price.
All the
price,
same.
same price.
And you still got the shoddy out of the batting?
Oh, yes.
It brings up a point, you know. If the shoddy collects under the machine, a man brings in 10 pounds of wool to be done, how much did he take away?
He only paid for what he took away.
Yes.
He didn't lose very much.
No, but he didn't lose very much.
No.
So if he brought in 10 pounds, he might take 9.5 away or even more.
Yes, more than that, I would imagine. And the wheel that is to your right, that was made by the third Mr. Weil, because he worked by himself. And he didn't have the ladies to shake the dirt out of the shoddy. So he made a wheel with chicken wire and burlap bags. And it worked quite well, I understand.
Isn't that amazing? The sawmills up and down the creek apparently went out of operation for
Yes.
one reason or another.
They didn't last very long, I don't think. I really don't know too much about the sawmills, but there's a little piece of pier that runs out at the side where one of the sawmills did stand at one time.
Well, of course, one thing with the sawmill is it was a great fire hazard. A good many of them
yes.
burned down, I think. Was that true also of the carding mill?
No, the only thing, the picking machine was dangerous. Now, they have a window in the picking machine that you could see if there was a match or something in the wool. And then they could immediately stop the machine.
Oh, yes, I suppose that could happen if there was a match.
Yes.
So, this inspection window, you looked through that before it went into the actual pickers?
No, you could watch, and if you saw smoke or anything, well, you could immediately put your fire out.
Oh, I see. But that was really the only dangerous part,
That's
the only flammable
dangerous
part of the operation.
Of course, now they had lamps, and the lamps would be dangerous around a mill like this where it's so greasy.
Well, you have lamps hanging up
Yes.
around the place, but not very many. They couldn't have given very much light.
No, it was very, very dark. Mrs. Wiggle, the lady who worked at the picking machine, said that it was very, very dark at nights when they had to work.
Did you enjoy working here?
Well, I didn't much.
It was a job,
It's a
though.
dirty job. I had the dirtiest job of them all. Getting in that old greasy wool and shake it and mix it up. Every week I had to buy a new pair of shoes.
Every week you had to buy a new pair of shoes. Why was that?
Well, it was so oily and greasy, I couldn't wear
Because
them.
of the grease in the wool. I thought the wool came in here washed.
Oh, Lord. It was washed with hand. It had to be all picked. Lots of it wasn't washed.
You must have met many of the men, the farmers, who brought the wool in to the mill in those
see,
days.
Old Mr. Weil, he was there, and he used to open the wool and take the names off keep all separate, to stick names onto the things that the one was wrapped in, so we know whose one it was. And each one was kept separate. Everybody's one separate.
Was it all girls working in the mill? And just Mr. Weil here. He was a pretty hard taskmaster, was he?
Oh, when he didn't want you to stand and talk. Get to work, girls, get to work.
So he kept you at it all the time?
Yes. Mean.
What was the working week in those days?
6 days.
6 days?
6 to 6, no meals.
12-hour days?
Right.
72 hours a week?
Yes.
$2 a week?
$2 a week, and if they worked overtime, Mr. Weil, I understood, went and got sandwiches or something to feed them.
Mrs. Reeves? There's a lot of nostalgia connected with the old days and a lot of interest in our heritage in Nova Scotia, the old times, but in some ways, I guess I'm not sorry that it's the present day.
I'm not either.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Our visit to the Weil carding mill is only one of several stops we made on a tour down the south shore of Nova Scotia, a tour that brought to light a great variety of what has been preserved of our heritage. In coming weeks, we'll take you to the Yarmouth Firefighters Museum, probably the best of its kind in Canada. Visit Bridgewater's Des Brisés Museum with the story it can tell about all the early settlers in Lunenburg County, the French, the German, and English. And the Des Brisés Museum has a story to tell, too, in the artifacts of the Micmac people. We'll talk to Thomas Radall about the early history of Liverpool, about Simeon Perkins during the Revolutionary War, and the exploits of the Liverpool Packet, the privateer which founded one of North America's greatest fortunes. Tom Radall will tell us how the heritage of the East Coast has provided him with an income as a writer. I hope you'll join us in weeks to come for these and many other subjects. For Heritage, I'm Neil Copeland.